Welcome to this first video on the various species and topics here at Select Aquatics. I hope you enjoy it. Stick around for the second half where I answer emails, often with video from down in the fish room. And if you'd like to order any of the Xenotoca doadrioi, please just email me at selectaquatics@gmail.com. And today's email topics are going to be about Goodeiid temperature and swordtail length, so I hope you enjoy that. So anyway, thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next installment. These had always been known as the Xenotoca eisnei San Marcos, and they recently had the name changed to Xenotoca doadrioi San Marcos, and they are an incredibly beautiful Goodeiid, really hardy, quite prolific. When raised in good numbers, they do eat their young a little bit, but young do survive and you can build up a colony with them. The doadrioi are easy to keep, they're hardy, they're well behaved with one another. I don't keep them in mixed species tanks because I understand they can be a little fin nippy, but I've not seen it. But then again, I wouldn't ever put these guys in with a betta or a longfin guppy or something. They are colder water fish, being a Goodeiid, so they prefer to be under 75 degrees. The ideal temperatures for these guys is about 68 to 74, 75, but this species can tolerate slightly warmer temperatures and could probably be kept long-term at around 77, 78. Here they're fed a combination of a fortified green flakes to provide a strong vegetable component of their diet, and then a carnivorous flake as well, and they're fed about twice a day. And of course, they certainly like any live foods or frozen foods or anything else you want to give them. This here is the 40 breeder tank of all the big adults. And I go in here about once a month and I pull all the fry out and then raise them up in the grow out tanks. I haven't set up a tank of just males of this fish, but that would be pretty amazing, I would think. You can see what an attractive fish they are, and also notice how peaceful they are. You don't see much chasing around going on. You definitely don't see any nip fins. The males all seem to get along well with one another. Very cool fish. And of course, as is most of the tanks here, they're in front of some clumps of some bulbitis fern. That works really well for hiding fry and such. This is a breeding grow-out tank for the doadrioi, and you can see here that there's a wide variety of ages. There's new fry in here. I've just got a couple adult males, 3 or 4 adult females, and then just let them reproduce. So you can see that the fry have built up such to the point that the colony is added to in size, so they're not fry eaters to the extent like, say, gambusia would be, or some of the other live bearers that tend to do that. Also, you'll see mixed in here are a few tiger limias that were just fry at some point. You can see they're not picked on, so how much the doadrioi pick on other species, they have a reputation, as do all the Xenotocas, for being a little bit of fin nippers, but there's also an alfaro in there. But they don't seem to bother, at least the fish that I've got in here with them. And I've kept them before with some other fish like this, and have not had a problem. But if I did put them together with other fish in a community tank, I'd keep an eye on them. In this tank, they are slightly older. Some of the young males are starting to develop the color that they're known for. Let's see if I can bring in a little bit here. And when young pairs are sold, they'll generally come out of this tank. But they're fed 2 to 3 times a day, dry food. Occasionally I'll give them white worms. And when I see fry in here, I'll usually put them in one of the other fry tanks. As you can see, they're pretty hardy fish. Lives in this is just a 10-gallon tank actually. So you can see there's quite a bit of room in here. A little petrichor there in the back. So if you're looking for an ideal first Goodeiid to get accustomed to this genus, that's very colorful, that's hardy and prolific, this may be your fish. Go ahead and contact Select Aquatics at gmail.com and I'll let you know how many I have here. And right now they're in great availability as of summer of 2017. And I look forward to hearing from you. Okay, since this is the first of the emails, I want to go ahead and just explain a couple things. I'll never identify who you are. I really don't get angry at anybody. I enjoy writing everybody back. Please don't be offended if I happen to appear that I'm making fun of your email, because I don't mean it if that's the case. But anyway, if you'd like to see your email answered here, or you want for me to address it in this forum, then go ahead and send it to me, and if I like it, I'll go ahead and do that. So anyway, enjoy. Okay, the first question today. Dave wrote to me, and he says, I've ordered from you before and was considering the San Marcos Goodeids. That would be the doadrioi. I see that they can tolerate somewhat cooler temps in the winter, but my fish room gets up to 82, 83 degrees in the summer. Is that too hot for them? When I first became aware of Goodeids in the mid-90s, I had heard they were cooler water fish. I never really knew what that meant. Is it like they're like weather loaches where they can handle upper 70s and such, but they're cooler, they're more comfortable at cooler temperatures? And I came to find out it comes down to species. All Goodeids, as a rule, do best from about 64 to 74. That's the temperatures that the Goodeiid Center keep them at in the Netherlands. Here I try to keep the Goodeids between about 68 and 74. But there are a couple species, the doadrioi being one of them, lion's eye is the other, and Amica splendens, that can handle warmer temperatures. And they can get up to the high 70s and be kept long term at 77, 78 degrees without too much of a problem. The lion's eye I've kept when I was at the local college where I kept them. That room would often would get to 81, 82. And they seem to weather it without much ill effect. But as a rule, I wouldn't want to keep the doadrioi for long periods of time any higher than about 77 degrees. The problem with Goodeids too is that many of them, if you cook them, you keep them at temperatures that are up in the low 80s, then they'll stop reproducing for you, and your reproduction rate will disappear, and that happens often. Some Goodeids, as I mentioned, don't handle the cooler temperatures, the warmer temperatures well. So if you keep them too warm for too long of a period of time, they'll at least stop reproducing, and after a while they just fritter away on you and die off. The crocodiles are that way. You don't want to keep them much higher than 75, 76 degrees for any period of time. So anyway, for 82, 83 degrees in the summertime, that's stretching it, I think. You probably don't want to pass, particularly since that might mean weeks in a row of having those kinds of temperatures, and I don't think the Goodeids can handle that. So anyway, the next question. Michael asks, do you have any long-sworded Montes? Can you pick a male with a long sword? I get that kind of question occasionally, and it deals with a lot of interesting things. So to answer this best, we're going to go down to the fish room. To deal with the issue of swords, the best place to start is with the fish that was used for the pet industry to develop the swordtail in the pet shops. And that's these guys here. Now this is a population of the Xenotoca hellerii. I don't know which population was used as starter fish for the fish that we now have in the hobby, but any fish you get in a pet store is going to be a hellerii. And they were chosen because they're large, they're gregarious, they're right out in front, they're very prolific, they're active, they're colorful. There's a lot of things that made them ideal for the pet trade, and so no other species of swordtail has really ever made it into the pet trade. The thing is that after these guys were first introduced and sold in the pet stores, breeders discovered they could cross them with platies and develop, really cool looking redfish and fish with, black fins and all kinds of things. So they could pull genetic combinations from other closely related species that could then be crossed. And so that led to all of your brightly colored domestic swordtails you get in the pet shop. The platies don't have a swordtail, so any swords you end up getting in the pet shops today, at some point in their background, even those that are sold as green swordtails, usually have some platy background in them, which means that their swords are not going to be very long, not as long as the wild fish are. I'm seeing a couple good long-sworded guys here. And these guys' swords are pretty good. They'll get to be, about their body length. And they're a good, robust, healthy sword. And they're really pretty fish. Now the Montezumas are different. Their swords are far more consistent than on the other species. I mean, their swords are generally 1.5 times their body length. You'll get older fish that will go to where their sword is twice as long as their body. Body-wise, they're not as big as the Maii or the Xenotoca here. But you can have a fish here that'll be 5.5 inches. The biggest Maii and the biggest Xenotopas I've had here have been about 6.25 inches. But again, when you want to fish with a really long sword, you want a fish that's old, and you don't want that. So what you're looking for would be a big late maturing male, and you're going to be pretty much guaranteed that you're going to get this full long sword, because all the Montes seem to get to that place. And these are a swordtail that's been crossed with a platy. And you can see how they're nice, big, huge, robust fish, but their swords aren't that long. So you lose the wild sword when you breed them to get that red gene that gives you that all-body red color. These are a great line of red albino red swords, red hellerii. Now the Alvarezi are in the same clade as the hellerii, so they're closely related. And their sword length is like the hellerii's is. It's quite long. These are the gold Alvarezi that were selectively bred from the line of wild Alvarezi that I have here. And the nice thing about these is that where in the pet trade you'll have a gold fish, or you'll have fish with selectively bred traits like this, but they'll be affected by the shorter sword of the fact that there's platies in their background. With these guys, they still have their full wild sword. So right now I don't have a lot of males to show on. There's just that bigger late maturing male there in the front of the screen. But you can see on some older ones, they get almost solid red as they get older. And again, that's not crossed with anything. There's no platy in these guys. And they have a fairly decent sized sword. So I'm working on breeding these guys up, and I'll have them available, and we'll post it as soon as they're ready to be shipped at the website. But their sword, the longer it is, of course, it's a great looking fish. Now the Xenotoca Maii, their sword is a little bit, not quite as long as the hellerii at times, although it can be just as long. The variation amongst fish is really wide with a lot of your wild populations. And with the Maii, They're generally a fairly big fish, and they have generally fairly long swords, and they're very colorful. The thing about swords too is their swords develop as they reach sexual maturity, and they generally tend to grow throughout the fish's life. It's not like it reaches sexual maturity and then it has a sword as long as it's ever going to be. In fact, the sword grows as long as a fish does usually, even though the body size of the fish may stop growing. So I've had people write me and say, you know, can you send fish that are only 5 inches long and make sure they have a really long sword? So I usually can't resist, and I write back, what, you want a fish that's too old to breed? You know, because that's what they're going to end up with. So what you're looking for to get a male with really a long sword is a real husky, large, late maturing male, and that's going to give you the odds of producing males. They're going to have a really long, a robust sword with some of these wild strains. But the Maiai sword length is similar to the Hellerii, maybe just a little bit shorter. And it's nice, it's kind of cool because it has the turquoise in it. See if I can bring one of them in here to show the turquoise color off in the sword on some of them. But it's a very, very pretty fish. So with the Montezumas, the sword's always fairly long and it's fairly consistent, whereas with other swordtail species, the swordtail is long, longer than you're going to find in the pet shop because they're generally been crossed. So I hope that answers the question. Okay, Ryan asks, hi Greg, I have a strain of swordtails from the pet store and I was wondering how I could spice my strain up a little bit, but I do not know how much cross different genus. So my question for you is, if I were to buy like 3 female swordtails from you, it would possibly for them and one of my males to have babies for a new strain. If so, which type of your swordtails would be most likely to do breed? Okay, the thing about this is if you get a pet store swordtail, well, first off, all the swordtails will cross. So they'll cross, some often not willingly, and I'll get to that in a moment. But you really don't want to keep 2 different species of swordtails together. The pet store swordtails that you get are going to be Hellerii, and I have a strain of Hellerii here, which are the Rio Otapas, and they would readily cross. So they would breed really well. So now let's say I had a swordtail and you really, really wanted it to cross with whatever it was you had, and it was a different species. For instance, let's say you wanted to cross the Maiai because they're really large with the Hellerii, a nice big red Hellerii swordtail. Which has been done. Actually, I used to have a red Hellerii Maiai cross that like the first year I had them here. They were crossed by a customer and who brought them over to me, and they were a really big, robust red swordtail, so they were very cool. But anyway, so to do that, if you just to put a bunch of Hellerii swordtails and a bunch of Maiai into a tank, they likely would never breed. The reason is because if the male Hellerii have other female Hellerii they would breed with, they would much prefer to breed with a species of, fish of their own species. There are also differences in Gonopodium. We won't talk about that, but that are often used to diagnose speciation, and sometimes the Gonopodiums are quite different between species, and that's one of the reasons why they don't cross very readily. So if you do want to cross them, what you do is you'd say you want to cross the Maiai and the Hellerii, then you would say put a big Maiai male with 5 or 6 Hellerii females. Make sure they're not gravid, that they're virgin females when you start off, and then as soon as you get a gravid female, then you've made the cross. But that's how you would normally cross it. So it's not a willingly thing, and it may take months for that to happen. So if you cross things, the usual result when you cross something is you get a lot of really interesting looking fish. It's always fun to do. But the main thing out of that is that if you do that and you raise them up for whatever reason, don't pass them out to your friends and get them out into the hobby, because the hobby doesn't need hybrids, particularly of some of these really rare species. So, but anyway, I hope that answers your question. And there's one more thing I should mention with respect to the swordtail crossing that I didn't think about when I was speaking earlier. Let's say you want to go ahead and do that. You've got a Hellerai. Let's say you want to start off with a Hellerai male and a bunch of Maiai females. So you've got a big Hellerai male and you've got, say, 5 or 6 females. Over a course of a period of time, they go ahead and they cross. So the Hellerai fish that you're using were a nice bright red strain, just like I used to have here. And what will happen is that batch will be born, and of that batch of 30, you're going to have a bunch that look like the father, you're going to have a bunch that look like the mother, and you're going to have a bunch that are a mix. You're going to have some that are just going to come out strange, and they're not going to, their color is going to be really weird, oftentimes. The point being, and this comes from guppy breeding, the rule was if of a batch of 30, you look for generally no more than 2 that you want to choose that come the closest to what you're looking for. Then the young from those are bred out, and then from that batch of 30 that they have, you'll choose another 2, and that's how you'll refine the line to eventually get fish. For instance, with that red Hellerai Maiai cross that I had, the reason that I no longer carry them is that they were still very early in their development. I think I got them maybe 2nd generation. And so I had, well, at the time, about 10 tanks going of them, just to keep a good consistent line that were both red and large, to look like the Maiai. I had, every other iteration. And so to maintain enough to keep going out to customers, I had to breed a lot of them because that trait wasn't really solid yet. And then what will happen is usually over 3 to 4 generations, as you keep doing that, whatever you're looking for will solidify. The guppy breeders say it's 11 generations to fully establish a trait in a line. I haven't gone that long as far as, on a single trait and work where I've kept track, but I've seen that it's at least 3 or 4 generations before you start seeing consistent showing up of what it is you were selecting for. So that's how a line is developed, and it's not a case of where, if you cross the 2 of them, then you're going to come out with 30 young that all look like exactly what you're looking for. It doesn't quite work that way. But it takes time, it takes a good eye, it takes patience, and I can talk more about selective breeding down the road. There are some traits you prioritize over others because they're more difficult to get back, such as size. You kind of always want to choose for size first, no matter how good the fish looks. But those are things we'll discuss in future videos. So, hope that fills it out a little more. Thank you for watching this first video on the doadrioi. The next video is going to be on the big Yucatan sailfin molly, the Volifera. That'll be coming out in 2 weeks, and they'll be followed by other species each 2 weeks. So I'm glad that you checked it out. And if you've got any comments, go ahead and write me at selectaquatics@gmail.com, or certainly if you want to order any of these fish, just let me know and we'll go ahead and discuss it and get them out to you. Thank you very much.